What is up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. A little bit of a new look, a little bit of a new background, and a new guest, Mr. Dylan Weisman from Upswing Poker. I am currently one of his students, so to speak, I guess. I'm taking your course in Upswing Poker.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the PLO Launchpad. My name is Dylan Weisman, and I am your lead instructor here to welcome you to the great game of Plo Matrix Omaha.
And once I'm done, I don't know if I've told you, I am going to take your advanced course. I've decided.
Hell yeah.
Because you've sucked me in. You've pulled me in. I am now feeling this love and feeling like I need more. I need to know more. These robust equity opportunities, I need more of them.
I love that term. And that's one of my favorite terms because it actually is a really good way of describing a situation. Like, to have robust equity means to be able to continue at a really, like, something is robust, it's full. Like it is at capacity.
Playable through many streets.
Through many streets.
Say.
It's thick. Maybe I should start calling it thick equity with and depending on how many C's you have, that's how robust it is.
It's like a long-term relationship equity. We can go all the way to the river together with no regrets or remorse. Although immediate equity, that's that hot chick at the club. Then the lights come on and you're like, oh no, I was there just on the flop. I don't know if I can go any further with this one. That immediate equity.
That's why you look for both. You look for the situation that has that good immediate equity, but also has that robust equity. And then, maybe it doesn't work out on the future streets, but at least you gave it a shot at the beginning because the immediate equity was high enough.
You want to put your money into something that you like more than likely will succeed. But if it doesn't, it's okay. You just played your best.
Exactly. And
so are we talking about relationships or PLO? What are we?
I mean, they're the same thing for me, actually. I don't know. That's not true. I'm sorry. But no, it's actually, this is a horrible tangent, but like when talking about, I've had multiple conversations with professionals outside of the poker world. And one of the biggest questions I get is, how does poker overlap with something like business or something like finance or whatever? And I tend to try to steer the conversations away from the more obvious overlaps. Like, if you're in finance, being able to do quantitative analysis and evaluate the equity of a decision, and try to move it more towards the emotional vocabulary that comes with poker. And I actually think there's a really big overlap for that and in relationships, because for the majority of professional poker players, you're actually in a relationship with your career, right? You're in a relationship, and there's a big difference between poker and something stable, like a tech job or whatever, because a lot of the times, not to say that there isn't variance in the general career path, but in the poker profession, you have to deal with a lot of ups and downs. And that, I think, has correlations that show up in relationships, both to yourself and with something like your significant other or your friends. Like, if you don't know how to have a good conversation about what's actually happening, that's a bad thing. If you don't have an awareness that something is wrong, that's a bad thing. And you really build those tools as you progress in your poker career. And I found that that's actually one of the largest places of overlap for myself in the realm of all things outside of poker. So you made a joke, but it's actually real.
So yeah, I've always heard, I've often heard poker being called the microcosm of, life, but I've never heard it being extended into a microcosm of like a reflection of your relationships and the different tools you're using. So that's an interesting way of looking at it, but I guess it's true. I guess it makes a lot of sense.
It's definitely, so the term poker is a microcosm for everything. I think it's accurate to some degree, but it's also overused by a lot of poker players because they're in a little bubble. And so I think the best, whereas that is a true statement, I would give it a yes and, where yes, that's true. And it doesn't always need to be applied as widely as a lot of people do. From my perspective, it's better to create overlaps where they make the most sense, but also try to create distancing, because then it doesn't taint you when you actually go out into the real world. A lot of professional poker players, as they try to transition out of poker, one of the biggest struggles is finding empathy for either humans or for situations that don't align with the construct of playing a game for a living. And so that's where you actually find a little bit of over-indexing into the whole poker as a microcosm thing. And then they don't index enough into the skills that I just described, right? Those soft skills, those intangible skills that they've built over years and years and years, but they don't know as a resource that they've built for themselves.
Aren't they better at poker because they have those specific skills that are a lot more difficult for the rest of us to attain? Like at a highly analytical thinker, someone like you, someone like I just interviewed Joe, who won the World Series of Poker main event 2015.
Joe's a smart dude.
Yeah, like a lot of the social skills that it sounds like you're referencing are I guess he's very robust in his equity in like being able to run sims in his head.
Yeah, he's thick.
But like the social cues are not like 100% as good as like someone you would expect to be working with at a corporate office. But so like he's more mathematically sound and analytical, and that's what makes him sometimes a better poker player. I don't know.
No, that's
I don't
totally,
know if I'm asking the right question.
No, I mean, I think you're making an observation, and I agree with it. The challenge comes from the poker players that have heavily indexed away from the social aspect and more heavily indexed into being hyper analytical. I have some friends that were literally some of the absolute best poker players on the planet from a game theory perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
They beat online 25, 50, 50, 100, 100, 200, all the best games in the world, or all the hardest games in the world, excuse me. And then you place them in social situations where they're forced to interact with humans that aren't optimal, right? To get to the highest levels, right, you tend to build a friend group that's also badass. And so it creates a little bit of an echo chamber where you don't get the exposure to people that are thinking in a non-logical, non-analytical way. And whereas a lot of the live pros, and that's why a lot of live pros have transitioned really well into the private game sphere, because a lot of that is about social networking and creating atmospheres and understanding who your customer is, right? There's an overlap into kind of the sales mentality, whereas there is a really heavy overlap, and I'm sure that you're aware of this, into like the hard data science or the software engineering or the financial engineering when it comes to those online crushers, because they're two tangential skill sets, but they don't always have to overlap. And in poker, you can choose which one to get better at if you want to. I'm someone that's tried to get good at both, with a little more indexing into the theoretical stuff from a poker perspective, but a lot more time put into my social and emotional awareness outside of poker through things like coaching and through therapy.
Yeah, I can tell that someone like you would make an excellent teacher, because you don't start off thinking anything's like a dumb question. I know anytime you and I have talked, you're like, yeah, I like that point. You know, you're never negative in, when discussing someone else's thought process, and you're very empathetic with that. And I think like a lot of people get frustrated when people don't have the foundation that they do. And like you're empathetic in understanding that, I have a day job, poker's not my full-time job, and you're cool with my perspective on things, and potential lack of knowledge where yours is,
Totally. So first, thank you. That's a very kind thing to say, and I really appreciate it. I think that where that maybe snarkiness comes from is in ignorance. And especially if you've become the best in the world at something, you tend to think that your thought process is superior to others' thought processes. And that's an unfortunate thing when it comes to, for teaching, it's destructive, right? You can't be a good teacher and think that you know more than everybody else, because by somebody asking a question in a specific way, I've now learned maybe a different type of inefficiency in thought processes as an educator. And so my job is not to judge where the questions are wrong, but just try to better understand them, because that allows me to learn from that person. And so for those humans that are a little more entitled, maybe is a good word, with their thought processes, they're a little more entitled and they have a little bit less patience. I think that that's just lack of empathy. because there is always a lot, like, it is true that there are some situations where someone just says something so far out in left field that there's not overlap. But even in those spots, I try to listen as best I can. One thing that really comes to my mind when talking about this specific subject is there's a I forget his name, and I wish I remembered it, but there was a Black man who spent years and years and years having conversations with members of the KKK, just as a
Yes, I've heard of him.
And that is such a beautiful thing, because if let's say that let's say someone says something to me that's so far out of left field, right? Like there's a Holocaust denier, for example. My immediate reaction is like, you crazy. But then the secondary reaction is, okay, why is that your thought process? And by having a conversation around it, that's where you can not only help that person, but it also gives you a better intuition into being able to have those conversations in the future. And that's what's really important to me, is like to be continuously building my vocabulary to be able to help people.
What's your threshold? And I hate to just like bring up this beating of a dead horse, but like someone like Action Ashley, who's like so deep into this conspiracy theory, who she believes Trump was actually reelected and everything's and like plenty of people have tried to be kind to her and say, look, it doesn't make you, like, no one should make you feel dumb for thinking this. You might be misinformed. She just blocks them. She's just holding steady. I just feel like at a certain point, there's some people I'm just like not willing to converse with. Like, what is your threshold for trying to help someone see the light, or to understand, trying to help someone to get to the logical thought process?
It varies, is the answer. And it varies depending on my own emotional resources. So if I'm in a situation where I'm maybe in like a depressive cycle or an anxious cycle, I have a really low threshold, because I have to spend those emotional resources in taking care of myself and giving them to the people in my life that I care about, like my partner or my family or my friends. I don't have the ability to hold space for these people because I don't have enough energy. Whereas if I'm like in full crusher mode, meditating twice a day, buff as all hell, like on an upswing, if I'm in that really tuned in space, I'm going to have a lot more bandwidth to have those conversations. But even in that situation, I think that you can kind of tell when someone is, you can tell when someone is at least remotely receptive. One of the biggest issues, I think, that comes with having a conversation like the person that you just described is that immediately people come at it with a "you're wrong" vocabulary. Right. Even in the way that you described it to me, it's like, hey, I know, like even in a kind way, you're kindly saying that they're wrong. And I've found there was a really good podcast that I listened to years ago where it was talking about how Democrats and Republicans can't have conversations with each other because they try to teach from their set of axioms. They try to teach from their knowledge base. And so obviously for a Republican, based on their ethical axioms, it makes no sense how a Democrat would think in XYZ situations. And this lesson has really stuck with me for years and years, because what they found was helpful was, instead of trying to find the spaces where someone is incorrect, more so trying to allow them to describe where their axioms come from. Because if that's the situation, then you can actually create a dialogue. It's like, okay, that's where that comes from. Like you're a Republican because that was your family values and those are your religious values, and you value your religious values for these reasons. Okay, I get that. Now we can start to have a dialogue. If somebody's not even willing to do that and they're just spewing at me, no go. It's very like, right, if you're not willing to actually go to the place of talking about why you understand or why you believe the things you do or feel the things you do, you're not going to get any back and forth. You're just going to have a hard wall, and it's going to be one person spewing to the other person. And in those situations, it becomes relatively obvious, and you can just back off pretty quickly.
So are you I guess right now within poker, there's a lot of people who think that if you have a belief system that you're so sure of, you should put your money, you should put some money down to wager that belief system. And a lot of people think that you can better teach lessons this way, where they lose a lot of money and it is painful. It didn't seem to work with Action Ashley. She lost a ton of election bets versus me and Bart Hansen and a bunch of people. But it seems like Andrew Barber, and a bunch of other people are pushing the, put your money
Where your
into
mouth is.
your belief systems, and hopefully that helps. Are you, do you think that would work, or what are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I think that it's a very good immediate feedback mechanism, but it's also easy. I don't know if it's a good teaching mechanism, because it's easy to blame things on variance. For example, if you lose a bet. Right. And so you're going to get that pain of losing, but there's a Brene Brown podcast that she does with Tim Ferriss, where they were talking about the mechanisms for which humans actually learn. And the basis of that vocabulary was about a punishment vocabulary versus a like love, compassion learning vocabulary and that's how people get out of, for example, anxiety and depression, or they deal with trauma. Like if you've had a traumatic response and someone says suck it up or something like that, and they have a more violent response to it, they're less likely to learn than if someone's coming in with empathy. And that's also from a self perspective as well. Like being mean to yourself, being self-critical, it is a mechanism that can allow you to succeed in the short term, but has been shown to burn out over the long term. And I've had a conversation with some really successful poker players that disagree with me, that are very big on the like grind 14 hours a day, put myself through pain. Even if I'm breaking emotionally, that's going to make me grow and change and be stronger. And whereas that is true to a degree, I think that it has a lot of underlying nasty long-term repercussions, myself included in that group, because I've done that to myself in parts of my career where I just went too hard and pushed myself too much and burnt out in ways that I'm dealing with like 5 to 10 years later, because I've now built more of an awareness.
Yeah, and also like I mean I don't know how you feel about Joe Rogan, but I do like parts of his podcast, and he did have this like MMA coach on there, and he was saying that like other countries don't beat their fighters up, like they're not physically beating themselves before a fight each time, and their bodies last longer because they're just sparring lightly. And It's kind of the same thought process, although it's your body and not your mind. There's a lot of similarities where like you're not beating yourself down continuously for 5 years at a time and then like taking years to recover, where you're just like pacing yourself through the process and reaping positive rewards throughout the whole thing, rather than just like, it's almost like putting yourself in mental jail for years to sacrifice for this reward that once you reach, you're just like too mentally exhausted to enjoy even.
Totally. I completely agree with that. With all that being said, I do think that if you're going to publicly speak about your views, you have to be able to back it up somehow. So whether that be monetarily or whether that be in a discourse like this, like if you ask me about one of my beliefs, I'm going to have a vocabulary behind why I feel that is a true thing, or I logically have come to the conclusion that is a true thing, or that I say I don't know. And so the money paradigm kind of skips. It makes it a little bit easier to be like, okay, if you believe this, put up. And so it might not be the best teaching mechanism, but I do think that there is merit behind it, especially if you're publicly spouting things out, because especially with the way that media and content impacts humans right now, like our society is so, and I'm obviously a big part of this, and so are you. It's like we influence people with the things that we create. And the thought processes of my brains are being put out to thousands to tens of thousands of other people. And so I have a responsibility. Personally, this is something like I try to be like, I don't know, conscious influencer. I don't know if that's a fucking term, but like I feel like I have a responsibility to the people that look to me for advice and to guidance, to be able to say why I believe what I say, or quote someone like Brene Brown, who's an actual expert in what she does, and say like, this is where I got that belief from. Specifically, if you're somebody who has a really large following, I think that there is a responsibility to do that. One way of doing that is by putting money behind it. It's like, I believe this so much that I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. And that is a mechanism to do so. Is it my preferred one? No, but I don't have anything against it.
So to deviate a little bit, because going back to like talking about you being a teacher and your
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
I'm curious, first of all, how you got into PLO. Because I know you started playing poker at 16 and you have an analytics background, so you're quite
Mhm.
bright. And then here you are. When did you find PLO? How did you fall in love?
So I was a huge Galfon fan when I was a kid. I think I watched my first Galfon video when I was like 15, 16, right in that age. And then he was one of the first, Blue Fire Poker came out, I think when I was 17, 18, and they had PLO videos. And I remember I always really enjoyed playing mixed games. Like when I was young, I would play every full tilt free roll because they had a new one every hour for a different game. So it'd be like limit hold'em, Raz, stud. And so I learned mixed games just because I played every $5 free roll or $100 free roll from the time that I got home from school until I passed out at night. And so I always enjoyed learning new games. And then PLO always, like, it immediately became something that made a lot of sense to me because my brain inherently was very good at understanding how combinatorics worked. Like that was something that I thought I knew a lot about when I was younger. And obviously I've gotten much better as I went through college and actually learned probability theory and became more of a professional poker player. But it always just made sense to me. Like having more cards was more information. And we're in a game like Hold'em, you have to a lot of the times create frequencies like randomness, like RNGing things, and do a lot of not guessing, but perception of what your opponent's range is. Whereas in PLO, the information was just always in front of your face, right? You have 4 cards. That means you have a ton of information about what's in the deck. And that allows you to really describe what your opponent's range is as well. And that concept, I can even remember that as being younger, like figuring out like the nut blocker bluff as a kid. It's like, if I have this card, they can't have this card. And so I can bluff here, kind of a thing, before it was really talked about. And that's a very basic concept now. But way back when I started playing PLO when I was 16, 17, being aggressive and being able to use your cards to bluff with, even if I didn't know what sizings to use or what frequencies to do it, it just printed money. And so I also had a really nice feedback loop of starting to play and just like printing money immediately in these games because it was just it was intuitive for me.
Do you think that the player pool has gotten better a lot slower than the Hold'em player pool?
Yes, definitely.
So when you said you were playing PLO back in the day, are players still making similar mistakes now? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally.
So one thing I love about, okay, there's many things I love about your course that I wanted to talk about. And make sure you go on to upswingpoker.com and Dylan's course is there. I'll put a link in the video. But so there's a ton of stuff I was doing pre-flop that was just big mistakes. And I think one thing that I love about your teaching style is making things kind of feel like bite-sized portions.
Mm-hmm.
So you're grouping hand types, the single suited, double suited rainbow, plus like your aces, your kings, and then your paired hand groupings, and then different positions. So looking at the pre-flop ranges by position and stuff. But basically, it's not only opened the doors to all of my previous mistakes, but also kind of delineates a lot of the process of the game that I was not thinking about beforehand. That playing in low stakes PLO, I now think back like, oh yeah, I've done that. I wasn't thinking about that spot. Oh my God, I was playing a really bad range, out of position, and just like remembering all the things that other players have done. Like, how did you come up with the process of just like making all of this information bite-sized, kind of palpable, or um, without getting into the crazy advanced course? Like,
Yeah.
how did you do that so well?
Thank you. That's really, really kind. It's funny you say without getting into the advanced course, because that's actually what the answer is. In order to turn something, from my perspective, into a very easily understood package, right? In those little bite-sized pieces, you have to really map out the entire system very, very well. And the advanced course is literally a textbook. Like, and I don't say that in a like in a exaggerating way. It's like you have the game theory optimal solutions for the majority of the first nodes of the game tree, put to you in a very precise way, and then talking about how to think about things. Chris Wayner, the professional who I worked on this course with, is an absolute savage. And he did such an amazing job of presenting a incredibly complex game in a way that you can actually watch it. The biggest thing that I saw for people that bought the advanced course, and this actually came from doing a lot of Twitch streaming, was that there was a barrier to entry to it being $1,000, but also a really big barrier to entry in terms of this mystique around PLO, where everyone had a thought process of, this is just too complicated. I don't even want to think about it. I don't even want to try to approach this because it has 4 cards. I can barely think about 2. And when that's the vocabulary, it comes in a lot of times in a place of fear, right? From a place of like, I'm not going to be able to understand this. I'm scared that I won't be able to figure this out. Therefore, I'm not even going to try, right? There's a fear of failure. So why even bother at the beginning? And so when
you decided to create the bunny hill for us.
Exactly. Yeah, that was literally it. It's like, okay, well, if everyone thinks this is too complex, first let's take, so pretty much all that I did for this $99 course was find the portions of the $1,000 course that I thought were the most fundamental and basic, and then communicate them to an audience that without an assumed vocabulary. And I think that's the biggest part. Whereas in Chris's, in the advanced course, there is a little bit of assumptions that are made in terms of how you think about the game of poker generally. And we do our best to build things from the ground up, but when going through a very game theory heavy course, it is just going to be a little more complicated. That's why it's the advanced course, right? It's $1,000 for a reason. And so I wanted to make sure that the first thing that I really focused on was what you kind of described. It's the vocabulary for even how to think about these games, because the main reason, in my perspective, that players make mistakes in any situation is because they don't know how to describe something to themselves. Like if you're calling too much, if you're folding too much, if you're playing too loose pre-flop, like every situation I can think of comes from a lack of vocabulary and a lack of a thought process. And so the thing that first came to me when trying to build this intro course was, how do I even think about poker? And from a most basic and fundamental level. And a really good way to teach those basics is with a game. And so I kind of tried to intertwine teaching PLO and teaching the introductory ranges with the way that I talk to myself in poker. So transcribing my vocabulary in as basic of a format as I could into a productized format into this course, and then using PLO as a vehicle to kind of it's kind of like how I got people to take their medicine, right? They want to learn PLO, but they need to learn how to think about poker. And so you put the bright, shiny preflop ranges up there, but then you also talk to them how to think about the preflop ranges and how to even think about analyzing things. And then they get their medicine that way.
I love your way of thinking about preflop ranges and in knowing the bottom of your range in each position.
Yeah.
And then not having to memorize every single thing. That was like kind of an aha moment for me. I'm like, oh, I don't have to memorize a gazillion cards now. I just have to know the bottom of my range.
Yeah, that comes from Chris. I don't want to take like mad props. He invented multiple things for our advanced course. I don't know if he invented that concept specifically, but there are multiple analyses and structures that he built for the advanced course that I get all the credit for in this intro course because a lot more people see my face. But that one comes from him, and I'll pass the praise along because he deserves it.
So your intro course, and I highly recommend it for anyone because there are like I said, like there are steps within PLO that are now delineated for you. Like you're able to understand why you're making decisions and in what spot, and there's a lot. And it feels a little uncomfortable for me because number one, I haven't studied poker in a long time. Number two, I mostly played Hold'em, right? So
yeah,
but it makes a lot of sense. And when you explain it, I understand it, but my brain just needs to get into a regular motion of thinking that way. But my question to you is, you're referencing PLO Matrix a lot, the Upswing Poker PLO Matrix. Is that something that also is included in the advanced course?
No, the matrix isn't included in the advanced course. So but we do give you preflop ranges in the advanced course, and like the
I have heard
ranges.
Just like I went and spoke with like some of my pro friends, and I was like, hey guys, What do you guys think about Munker buying it? Everyone's like, no, don't do it. Don't buy Munker. Don't. It's going to take you forever just to run one set of hands. So they're like, go get the Plo Matrix. Just save yourself some pain. They've already done the work for you. I'm like, got it. So everybody, just to let you know, don't bother with Munker. Just do get the Plo Matrix. It's $50 a month or 55.
Yeah.
Now,
can I actually talk? I want to talk about that one thing.
Yes, let's talk about that.
Because so many people ask me, should I get Munker or not? And if you're asking me that question, the answer is no 100% of the time. Like that,
For other reasons than the ones I mentioned?
Yes.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, no, it's so that question, it's a good question because it's like, I've heard that Munker is the shit, right? Like I should learn game theory, so I'm going to buy Munker Solver. One of the biggest issues with a tool like Munker Solver is that it can give you so many wrong answers if you do it incorrectly. And it's not just about plugging the sims, in wrong. It's about interpreting the data incorrectly. And so as a data analyst, I'm sure you understand this. You can put data in front of somebody's face, but if they don't know how to process it or think about it, you can pull the wrong insights out of it.
Right.
And so that's the biggest issue with a tool like Munker Solver is that even if you can get past all of the high barriers to entry for like running sims and the software and all that stuff, you still also don't even have the appropriate thought process and vocabulary to actually learn from it.
Right.
And so that was literally the point of the advanced course was to make something where it's like, hey, should I buy Munker? No, you shouldn't. You should buy this course instead. Because we're going to teach you how to think about game theory from the ground up and then run the sims for you. And that was the whole point of that course, was to run the sims for all of the most prevalent nodes of the game tree, so that until you've gotten to the point where you've watched that course 5 times and are beating PLO 400 online, you don't need Munker. And then once you've gotten to that place where it's like, you know what? I know I need Munker now because I've already gotten everything out of this. You're not asking the question as to whether or not you need it. You know that you need it because you've lost there's no longer anything for you to learn with the tools that are available to you. Right.
And I've heard that a lot too, that like the Munker output, a lot of people just like don't understand it, and just why not I'm a big fan of letting the professionals do the heavy lifting for you and then just reaping the rewards. So just go get that. Now
we share this together. That's one of our favorite shared traits. It's like, let's let the smarter people than us do the hard work and just learn from them.
Right. And I like to just follow what my smart friends are doing. You know, my best friend Andrew has a PhD in economics and he tells me he's investing in something. I'm probably going to put some money in that too.
Yeah.
So Dylan, how long do you think it would take an average person to go through your course? I haven't completed the whole thing. I have to be honest with you. There's a lot of information. You pack a lot of information into short videos. The videos aren't long, people. There's just I have to rewatch them. And I feel like I'm a, average intelligent person. I have to rewatch them, take notes. It's very dense. Tell us how long you think.
I'm going to cop out on this answer and not give a time, but more so it's about 9 hours of content. So the floor is 9 hours, and some people watch it in 9 hours. But I've had, for example, my really good friend John, who's like in law school, really intelligent dude. He is similar to you in that it's taking him a long time because he's really sitting with the material and with the information, watching things multiple times. He's studying it with other people. He is asking me a bunch of questions, kind of a thing. And so if you were watching it one time in 9 hours and you think you've gotten everything out of it, I'd say that's a red flag, because I built it in such a way where it's very, very easy to just watch and you can assimilate information, but that doesn't mean that you've gotten all of your money's worth yet. And so if I had to give an estimation, probably like 20 hours would be good. Like watching it all the way twice, or watching it 1.5 times and then studying on the side, or having conversations with people. Something that I really appreciate about a course like this one is that it's really easy to buy it with a friend and then build, I know this is something you do, and just build study groups, right? And be able to have conversations, create more intelligent questions, not intelligent questions, create more informed questions that you can then look up later or ask me or another coach or whatever as you go along in your journey. But just because it's taking you a while, I actually think that because you are a more intelligent human, that's the reason why it's taking longer. It's because you recognize that you had assumptions you were making that you now have to reprogram in your brain. And because you have that awareness, it's actually going to take a little bit longer. Whereas somebody that's just watching it all the way through and thinking that they got everything out of it, they're not going to have gotten everything out of it by definition, because they're not thinking about it critically enough, generally speaking. And that's not to say that you can't do it. And I'm not hating on anyone who just watched the course once and moved on. Like you're my favorite. Don't worry about it. But I do think that that is a little bit of a red flag in your learning process if you just watch all 9 hours and think that that's it and that you have nothing else to learn.
Or you're Joe McKeon.
Or you can just pick it up really quickly. That's another, I'm kind of preaching. Unfortunately, I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite here, because I do tend to watch things just like once and be able to assimilate the information. But I don't want that to be the way that I teach people to learn. I don't think it's
I'm
optimal.
too OCD. Like I am grasping on every single word you say, and I'm trying to understand your vocabulary, because you're often saying things like robust equity, which I was not in my PL or any of my poker vocabulary before you. And then immediate equity, which, you know, just your terms, just understand, just having that baseline. It feels uncomfortable right now because I'm trying to establish it as a normal part of, you know, my thought process with PLO. I do have to say the one thing, my one goal, my first goal with this was, and I'm sure that a lot of PLO, like newer players or players who haven't studied, often what happens is you're on the turn or the flop or even the river, and like you don't know what the fuck is going on. Like you don't know how you got there. You don't know what to do because you have no idea what your opponent has. You basically got there with like a subpar hand, and then you basically c-bet because you thought you had to or whatever. Like you're making decisions without knowing why and not understanding, you know, your first mess up was your pre-flop ranges. So I really love the fact that I'm starting to get to a place where I understand. And I hate admitting this because no one wants to admit this, but I understand why I'm getting to a flop. I understand my c-betting ranges better, or what percentage I'm going to be c-betting, and how I coordinate with the flop, you know, how big my c-bet is going to be compared to what the flop is, and whether it's heads up or whether it's, you know, 13 SPR or a 7 with a 3-bet, you know, like I'm learning all this stuff. So
you're doing good.
that is the one thing, ladies and gentlemen, if with PLO, you are in a hand with low stakes PLO and you don't know what the hell is going on, please take this course. I'm telling you, you'll thank yourself.
Oh yeah.
Let me see. What else did I want to talk to you about?
I want to say one thing. You said
you to say whatever you want. Yes.
You said something beautiful where you said that it's hard to admit this makes you uncomfortable, right? As somebody who's played poker or been around poker, and this is one of the biggest leaks of poker players, is that they think that their way of approaching the game is correct, and or in line with correct, and it makes them uncomfortable if someone challenges them as to being correct or not. This is why we see the big grudge matches happen all the time, right? Where it's like, no, I think my way of thinking is correct. In the super high roller scene, there's a different cliques that all have their approach to the game. But when you find yourself in a situation where it's uncomfortable because you're seeing that your way of thinking was maybe not the optimal way of going about it, that is beautiful, because that is this is a Chewy thought process. Like where there's the most discomfort is where there's the most growth. And so because you're finding yourself in these uncomfortable situations, it's because you have enough of an awareness to know that something was wrong, and your ego is like fighting you on the inside because you're like, I don't want to admit that this was wrong. And so it creates discomfort because your reality is different than what you want it to be, right? You thought your reality was this thing, but that's not how it actually was. You actually had less of an understanding than you thought you did. And so it created this discomfort, but that is a great guiding light to a place to put more time and effort and energy, because you're going to get the most results from those situations. Like where there is discomfort is where you can truly find the most returns for energy put in, because by definition, there's a lot to learn there if you've been uncomfortable.
I have to say, and I'm going to deviate a bit from poker. This is one thing I love about you is that not only do and some people may not know that you and I have become friends
Mhm.
outside of just slicing each other on in Among Us, which you don't play very much anymore. But like you definitely as a friend give me this like really nice safe space to just be myself, to say anything, and you have this like great empathy about you and kindness. And you also make me very aware that like a lot of my psychological things that I go through are like almost like understanding what they are or label them and then being okay with them. I think I was just raised in such a way where it's like work hard, don't complain, blah blah blah. And it's like, oh, I'm having a high anxiety day. Like I've never thought about saying like I'm having a high anxiety day. My energy will be less. Like I will not have enough energy to maybe comfort other people. I need to do some self care. I always thought like shit, I'm having anxiety. Now I got to stop it. Like you really make me be conscious of things about myself and being okay with those things also. And I feel like you should be a poker coach slash like psychological coach or psychological friend, like help you be okay.
That's first, that is a beautiful thing to say. And also it's really easy with you because you it's like you're like one of the most beautiful things about you as a person is that you're willing, once somebody opens up to you, you'll do the same and you'll be vulnerable. And to have that ability to be vulnerable is such a superpower that not all humans have found within themselves yet. And so I think that what you see in me is just real talk, a reflection of yourself, and that's something that's awesome. To go
Oh,
back to,
thank you. I am so lucky to have found you as a friend. I'm going to tell that to everyone. You're
I,
such an awesome person.
I feel
I
the same
appreciate
way.
you a lot.
I appreciate you too. What you're saying is kind of what my goal is. I get the people because they want to learn the PLO. That's how I sucker them in. But then for those humans that have kind of started to follow me more and more, they say it for the PLO, but it's also a lot about the like how to be a sustainable human being. Not just in the poker world, but like in the entrepreneurial world as a whole. Because a lot of poker players they don't just play poker. They play poker and then they have a side hustle and they're trying to start a company, and that's the environment that I live within. Like I play poker, but I also do product development and like analytics and multiple other professions. And in order to balance all those things, you just have to have, I think that you just kind of have to have your shit together emotionally. It's really, really hard to be able to manage variance in your professional life or in any facet of your life and then continue feeling healthy and sustainable. And so I hope that, like, one thing that I really want to do for the poker community and something that I hope can be part of my legacy, at least other than being pretty good at PLO, is to be somebody that helps the entire community learn to be more emotionally aware and to help to build or bring in vocabulary from spheres outside of poker. Like a lot of the stuff that I quote is either from like Brene Brown or Esther Perel or a Buddhist teacher that I had at one time. Like these humans that are professionals at what they do, and I've found overlaps in poker. Like I don't quote other poker players a lot of the time, because poker players, if they're just pulling things out of poker, they're usually biased. And so I try to find the best information from outside of poker, find where the overlappings are, and then bring it in. Specifically when it comes to the mental game and then the like the emotional wellness and sustainability stuff. And so I really hope that I can like, and the content that I'm going to continue to create, I think is going to be in that sphere. Like in the advanced course, my favorite part of it that I made was my professional fundamentals section, which is all mental game. It's about like tilt control and downswings, and I made it while in the biggest downswing of my entire life. And so it was like super emotionally vulnerable because I was taking all of the tools that I was using for myself personally, and it's like, okay, what is everything I'm doing right now in the middle of this 6-figure ridiculous downswing to keep myself sane? And then documenting it all, journaling it, and then I took all that information and then just presented it to people which is why it feels very important and authentic to me.
I find that there's a lot of toxicity within poker. Um, online. There's a lot of people just playing online who haven't socialized well, lots of different
Yeah.
forms of toxicity. What are your thoughts on it?
It's a tough, that's a big question, because I think like so when I was coming up, there was a huge culture in the high stakes arena, for example, like with pickup artistry and just like spending all your money on blingy stuff. And that was what was seen as being the winning, who was ever the biggest baller, quote unquote. That was what winning was. Nowadays, you have dudes like Jason Kuhn and Dan Smith who have like some blingy stuff, but they also are caring the most about being a good person, and then being buff as all hell, and then being emotionally stable and being vulnerable. We've started to see a shift at the highest levels in the poker community. Like even a dude like Bryn Kenny, who no one would say has like GTO life skills or whatever, like life fundamentals. He's pushing out tons of positivity and being like, yeah, I want to make a lot of money to be able to change the world, kind of a thing. And so I think at the highest levels, what's really cool in poker is that we are starting to see an evolution and a shift to a more quote unquote like woke perspective. That's not ubiquitous across the board. And I'm in an echo chamber, so obviously there's different outlets of this. But the thing that's a little challenging is that it hasn't permeated all the way back down yet. A lot of players that are maybe a little bit younger. Well, actually, no, there's this middle ground. There's like this really toxic middle ground where there are people that only are online and haven't built good social and awareness skills. But then there's, for example, people like Landon who did that, right? Like they built their whole thing online, but because their entire culture was online to begin with, they still learned good things online, because that's what's actually happening with the younger generations. It's like the positive communication culture is actually within their digital landscape. And so it's not as toxic as it would have been, for example, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We're starting to see, like, I know a couple of the 21-year-old crushers. They're just good humans. You know them too, like Landon, Jeremiah, good people.
Lennon and Jeremiah are like one of the top tiered people. It doesn't matter about their age or anything. Like they're one of the best people I've met recently.
Exactly. And they didn't grow up with like a big social sphere, right? They like a lot of their life was online. With all that being said, we are still in a community that is very money focused, right? Because poker attracts, and because of that, poker is going to attract a certain subset of people that are very money focused. And if that's what you're optimizing towards is just making a lot of money, you're going to miss out on a lot of nuances that you can learn as you kind of go on your poker journey. It's a big mixed bag, because no matter what, within any subculture, you're going to have people who are toxic, people who are less toxic, and the whole spectrum. I am a little bit more optimistic for poker as moving forward, as long as the people who have the spotlights use that spotlight in a healthy way. And that was another big issue, right? Was for like during the Full Tilt saga, you had dudes like Phil Hellmuth and Mike Matusow or whatever that were just like blasting how much money they had and blasting how great they were. And that's going to permeate throughout not just like the online culture, but the ESPN culture and the more general viewpoint of poker. Whereas hopefully, as we use new mediums like Twitch, where you get direct interaction with the influencers themselves, we can create a little more of a healthy dialogue around like internet toxicity and what even defines toxicity and what does that mean? Because what some people think are toxic, other people just think is a vocabulary style. And maybe both people are wrong in some way, right? Because they just haven't found a vocabulary to communicate. And so it's not just about a toxic culture, but even defining what that means.
And I'm gonna ask you, because I think you're a good person to ask about women in poker.
Okay.
And this is a question that I don't know the answer to. So, but I'm always asked, what do you think needs to be done to bring more women into poker? It's a difficult question.
I think that's the hardest one you've asked me so far.
I hate it, but I think it needs to be talked about. Like I hate talking about female poker players as my favorite female poker player. I want to say, I'm a big fan of Vanessa Cade. she just won 1.5 million.
Shouts to her.
Shout outs to her.
Dude,
but
it feels great to change your life in a day. It's awesome.
Hell yeah. I couldn't be happier for her, especially given everything that's happened. But, I don't want to be like, oh yeah, the female poker player Vanessa Cade,
Yeah,
but like it is a thing. I mean, it's I feel like part of the reason why there aren't that many women in poker is because of the toxicity. Uh, I I dealt with a lot of it even live when I first started, and it was a different type of game then too. There was a lot more angle shooting and stuff.
totally.
But I don't know how we can bring more women into it. I don't know if you've thought about it.
I thought about it a little bit more than I thought about it a decent amount. It feels like a similar structure to women in STEM, for
Hmm.
example, where there are there's a lot of social programs that do pretty well and a lot of social programs that just fall on their faces. But like there is a really big uh, gap in the count of female software engineers and male software engineers,
Right.
and why that's true. And that's a huge topic that I don't think that I have the vocabulary to speak to in an educated fashion. But if I were to like give some basic answers, it would be to study which of those parallel systems worked really well. So, for example, I think that doing things like a women's only event is an ostracization. It doesn't feel good, right? It feels kind of like, even though the vibes in that tournament, from everything I've heard, are phenomenal.
Best.
Yeah, exactly. So that's great because you don't
It's
have
my
to.
favorite tournament. That if I
Yeah.
only had to play one, that would be it.
And that's awesome. And I think that trying to create more environments like that without having it have to be a female only poker event,
Right.
kind of a thing. But that takes a lot of education, and it takes a lot of it's kind of the same thing as like how do you affect racism or sexism generally? The answer by definition is education from the ground up. Like that is always the correct answer, is starting people off where they're learning, so that by the time they get to the point where they're interacting with race or with gender, they have a healthy vocabulary to interact with it. And so in poker, I obviously can't go and like teach everyone how to treat women well. Like that's not something that we can do from the ground up. But what we can do is try to like do our best to create a vocabulary where if there is a toxic situation, that it's like you instead of just telling someone that they're wrong, being like, hey, this is what this other human is feeling, this based on what you're doing, let's try to create some points of empathy. But doing that on a systemic level is like, I don't know if I have a great answer to it, because I would literally have to do a deep, like I would kind of view it in the same way that I would view building a social program, where I would go look at parallel programs and figure out what worked really well, find where the parallels are, and then build it out from there.
Do you think the problem is a small portion of the male poker population that we're all focusing on? Do you think that the majority of male poker players are being, are treating women? I hate saying treating them well, because I don't like the thought of being treated special, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. I
Yeah.
want to be treated as an equal. I don't
As
want
a
to be
human.
put on a pillow and here you go, you little ornament, walked around. I want to be treated like an equal.
I think so I'm going to answer that question by saying, I think the majority of people are doing their best. And the issue is that some people, like, because of upbringings, their best is defined as what you're describing, right?
Right.
So they're trying, they're absolutely like by definition in their brain, they're being respectful given
Right.
given what they were taught and what they were educated with. And so what's unfortunate is that doing their best doesn't always translate to the correct result. And
Right.
so I think the crux of your question is like, are we focusing on the bad actors, or is everyone else generally doing a pretty good job? I think that by definition, you always focus on the bad actors more because they're the loudest in almost any space, because the people that are bad actors are heavily bad actors. They try really hard to be really loud and get seen, kind of a thing. And so you put a lot of focus on that. It's like the Donald Trump strategy. But even on top of that, we also have to kind of retrain what it means to treat someone well, right? Because like if I were to coddle you, you'd be like, Dylan, what the fuck are you doing? Like
I would hate it. I wouldn't be friends with you if you
no,
coddled
yeah,
me.
of course not. But there's so many humans that don't even know that that's the correct answer. And I think that that will change as more of Landon's generation kind of grows up, because there is still a gender disparity, and there will be throughout time. But I do believe that it's becoming less and less as like with the younger generations. I've seen that to be true as a social trend. And so where you have, and also a lot of people that are drawn to poker have money, which means they tend to be older. And so they tend to have older axioms. And so the older axioms tend to be the ones that maybe aren't as woke when it comes to gender and when it comes to interacting with women in poker. And so it's not like if we wait it'll fix itself thing, because I do think that there needs to be active intervention. But I think that the active intervention will have more efficacy because there will actually be more advocates for it as well, for the people that are in the spotlight as we move forward in time. And the younger, like the Landon generation kind of comes up, and it isn't even a thought in his brain to treat you differently, right? It's just like, no, of course I treat Veronica the same because I treat everyone the same. That's how humans work. Right now in poker, there's just a large percentage of the population where that's not their vocabulary. And that I try my best not to find blame or hate in that, because that's what they were taught, that's what their education was. And so they're still trying their best, given what they've been given. We do need to still, like when it gets kind of nasty and it's like someone calling like a dealer baby or whatever, it's like, yeah, that's cringy, super cringy. And there are ways that as somebody, like if that makes you feel uncomfortable, there are ways to go about it without like shaming them. And that's a really, really big thing that Brene Brown talks about, that we talked about. Like shaming somebody is not going to change their vocabulary. If somebody calls a dealer baby and I go, oh, do you want me to call you baby all night? That dude's going to get pissed. He's not going to learn from that experience. He's going to feel shame and not grow in any single way. He's just going to feel attacked. And so if you are someone who's an advocate, your job is not to kind of take the blunt force mechanism. It's to interact in a way that actually will have lasting change.
So what do you say to the dealer who's calling a woman baby?
I usually will ask the dealer, it's like, hey, do you like being called that? Like, instead of interacting with him, it's like, hey, it's like and even saying to him, like, I know you're trying to be respectful. It's like, I don't know if so it's like
getting called that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, so you acknowledge the other person, like acknowledge the person's who's calling them baby, being like, I see that you're trying to be nice, right? You're not trying to be rude. You're not trying to be mean. Like your intention is good intention. So instead of putting them on the defensive, you create like an allyship at the beginning of that. It's like, okay, this was your intention. Is it working? And somebody else would be like, oh, I fucking love this. And so I don't want to assume that the dealer doesn't like it, because that might not be true. That's not for me to say, kind of a thing. Like, I don't want to just assume ubiquitously that all female dealers don't like being called baby. Maybe that's their thing. Maybe they get off on it. Maybe they think that it makes them more tips, and so they don't care. Like, I don't want to impress my thought processes onto them. I want to create a dialogue between the two people.
You don't want to ruin the girl's hustle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like I ain't trying to block a hustle. Like that is not in the cards. And that's
because I do see that with some dealers too. I'm like, okay, girl, I see what you got going. This is your game. You got you know you're making the money. I got you.
Yeah, exactly. That's not on me to blow up her spot like that, right? I'm not trying to get in between there. So you can. So it's and that's actually, I think, where the people who want to be advocates sometimes go a little bit overboard, and that where it's like you feel so strongly in your beliefs that something is wrong that you forget that everyone is an individual and that we're on a spectrum, and that
and I think those dealers, and I have seen that. I know some people, waitresses and dealers who know their audience and know which ones are the baby type, which ones are they have to schmooze a little bit with to get the tips. So you don't want to ruin that game. But I don't want to make this too much about me, but like what you described is exactly how I feel about dating. I find that not everyone, but I tend to date a little younger because I find younger men, and not too young, but like I find younger men to be a bit more woke and a little more of the feminist type that I like, where I'm treated as an equal, where I'm not being pandered to or patronized. I do find guys even my age and older to kind of treat me as though I'm an ornament and put me on like a little soft pillow. And they think that they're being a feminist because they want equality for women, of course, but they're treating me like something really special, which I want to be treated special, but not special. It's hard for me to make sense of this. I don't want to be treated as this like little delicate lady who is not your peer.
Yeah.
Do you know what
You
I
want to
mean?
be
I want to be someone's peer. I don't want to be pandered to. I want to be able to make decisions with my partner and not be like, oh, you sweet girl. Like, let me make all the decisions. You just look cute. So
totally. It's like you want to be treated as an equal and as a human,
as a,
but then also like a princess. Because I want to be treated like a princess in my relationships. I think that's a gender neutral thing.
Right, but that's different, right?
Exactly. No,
Than
that's what I'm
not being
saying.
their peer. Yeah.
I'm
So,
saying it's both simultaneously. It's like it's
right, right.
being the peer and being seen as an equal and being treated as an equal, but then also being treated like a princess because you deserve it, right? Like it's
Just
both of those at the
telling
same
me my
time.
floofy ears look cute.
They do. They look phenomenal.
Um, one more thing I wanted to ask you, and I wanted to go back a little bit to PLO. I might edit this and put it earlier.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that advanced course. What can someone, think about a time frame for completing that advanced course, on
That's
average?
that's a good question. If you like, I have people that have spent multiple hundreds of hours in there, myself included. It's about 35 hours of content. So it's the way that we kind of describe it is Chris is literally a college professor who has built a textbook, and I'm Chris's TA, where like Chris has put the textbook together and he describes it like he's not a bad college professor, but he is a college professor. Where it's like homie is so far up there, bringing all this advanced information into the general vocabulary and presenting it in a way that you can actually use. Like he does a very, 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 very good job of that. With that being said, it's not trivial information. It's hard to digest. And that was kind of what my role within the course was to, I made a full section of supplementary videos where I just took individual concepts that felt like they were harder to understand and made a full video out of it. Because it needed, instead of like Chris mentioned it in 5 minutes, and I thought it needed 30 extra minutes of in detail analysis of just like, what does this concept even mean? And what are some additional examples for it? And so if you have that $1,000 course and you don't spend 100 hours in there, you're not getting all of your money's worth. I literally, because one of the best things about that course is that it's a reference guide as well. If I mess up in a spot or I think that I'm miscalibrated for like, let's say that I forgot what my, let's say I haven't played in a couple of months and I forget what my turn probe range is in a single race pot when it goes check on the flop. I can literally go to the course, go to that exact video, and Chris has the ranges built out with the sizings and the frequencies right there for you. And so it's something that, and because it's built from a game theory perspective, it's evergreen. It's not like game theory is ever going, we might get some more advanced solvers, but I don't see those advanced solvers giving us different answers. I see them giving us better ways of accessing the answers. From my understanding of game theory, I could be completely wrong. And if I am wrong, I'll make another course. But the way that we built this was for it to be evergreen, was for it to be a literal reference guide for game theory optimal pot Omaha. And so it is a little bit daunting, but it's put together in a way where you can, if you put in the time and study, you will print money with it. We had a couple players. One of my favorite things ever, a good friend of Upswing Poker's VP Mike Brady, shout out to Brady. He bought the course, studied it like mad, copy and pasted Chris's strategy, and within 3 months was printing 10 BB per 100 on Ignition in like the high stakes games, like 2, 5, 5, 10, 10, 20. Just print. I mean, I don't think it's printing that big at 10, 20, but it was printing that big at 2, 5 and 5, 10. Just slaughtering the game, because if you have a solid fundamental game theory approach and you enter the 100 big blind 6 max range, which is what we built the course off of, you have the correct answers. There's not any ambiguity anymore. It's like, this is the way that a solver plays this game. If you can understand why it's doing what it's doing, it'll allow you to be able to construct your ranges and your thought processes in a repeatable fashion. So it's not just about getting the right answer, it's being able to execute on it and being able to execute on a strategy. And you can make a strategy simpler, give up a little bit of EV, and make it easier to execute on. And that's great because you're still printing money, because everyone doesn't have a winning strategy. And that's another really big thing about the course. You can make it as complicated as you want it to be by going more, like instead of building 2 ranges, you can build 3 ranges in a specific spot. But us humans aren't really great at doing that. And so instead of building 3 ranges, we just build 2. And you only lose a little bit of game value by doing that, but you can actually execute on it. Therefore, you print money with it. And that's kind of what you can expect from the advanced course is when you buy it, you're buying a textbook with multiple instructors, myself and Chris, that are guiding you through this textbook to truly teach you not just about PLO, but how to really think about game theory. Like my intro course, it touches on game theory and it touches on some of the thought processes, but Chris takes it to a whole nother level. And he uses the full suite of what's available in Munker, but disseminates that information in a way that's actually understandable. And he's the reason why I am one of the best PLO players now. It's like I wasn't very game theory oriented. And then Chris was my main coach. And that's why I wanted to do this course with him. I'm like, dude, you're such a savage. Like, let's turn these stacks of notebooks that you've built of Sims and turn it into a product kind of a thing. So that's kind of what you can expect when you're signing up for it. That also doesn't mean that you have to spend that much time. You can just buy it, watch the videos. It's worth it. Like the ranges themselves are worth $1,000 that are inside of that course. It's almost impossible not to get $1,000 of value out of it.
You guys should just change the name of the course now to Printing Money.
That's in a lot of our ad copy. It's like, do you want to make lots of money at PLO? Buy this course. Like that is those are the words that we say to people because it's a true statement. It's like, you will make money. We have multiple users that have said this is how they made money. It's like
my answer is yes. Yes, I want to.
Yeah, and you're in a really good spot. Also, I think that it's really cool that you're kind of taking the step from the intro course to the advanced course, because it's going to not just make you a better PLO player, but it'll make you a way better poker player generally. Like my Hold'em game has gotten so much better by getting good at PLO because I got so good at PLO that I actually understood game theory. And now I can take that same fundamental game theory approach and then just apply it to a different system, which is Hold'em. Like your vocabulary overall just gets better.
Yeah, I've actually found a love for poker again. So awesome. I'm enjoying this learning process. It feels like a brand new thing for me.
Poker was the old fling and now it's hot and spicy. They came back, they got like a nice, they worked out for a couple months. Now
they worked out. Yeah. They got in shape. They're eating better. They're running and they're like, taking care of business now. So I'm in love again.
That's awesome. Poker is one of those that happens to me. I have taken years off of poker multiple times because it just wasn't that interesting to me. Other things became more interesting. And then about 3 years ago, I stopped everything. I was like, you know what? I want to become as close to the best of the world I can at poker. And then just worked really hard to get to that point because I found that love for the game again. There's also a very nice feedback loop. When you get better, you start printing more money. You want to get better because you're printing more money. And then you hit a big downswing and your body starts freaking out because that's what happens to everybody.
So you have to make me a promise. If I happen to make a final table this year at the series, you'll let me hire you as my coach.
1,000%.
For the PLO games. I'm planning on using this to enter some PLO tournaments. So we'll see.
We have a tournament section to the advanced course. Like I made that myself and I really like it. I think it turned out pretty well. I can't wait for you to ship one so that I can sit on your lap for the winner's photo. That's my favorite part.
We'll do it. I'm down for it.
No, I want you to wear a Santa's hat. Just so
that, Santa hat?
Yeah, it's like, because think about the gender construct of like everyone sitting on Santa's lap. It's like female Santa this time. Let's break it down a little bit. And I'm also a Jewish kid, so it'll be even better. Let's break everything down.
Okay, I'm clipping this. And we're going to replay it if that ever happens. But
I truly hope it does. That would make me so happy.
My goal right now is to make day 2 of a PLO event, so we'll see.
PLO tournaments are soft as hell. They're so soft. They're just.
I know people like me used to enter them.
the level. My favorite tournament in the world is the 25K PLO at the World Series because people are putting in $25,000 that are like okay at tournaments or okay at PLO, or there's a couple crushers like Omaha for Rolls will show up and like some really, really good players will show up to that tournament. But generally speaking, I'm like, this is the softest 25K I've ever seen in my entire life. It's insane. Like how that feels.
If Bitcoin goes to the moon by this summer, I can have 100% of my action. So we'll see.
That's great. Me too.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. You're a lovely human. I adore you. And I appreciate you making this amazing course. Hopefully you'll see me doing better once I get more into it.
I think
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you will. I think you're going to get better. And I think that it's going to be fun when you start playing live again and playing PLO and you start sending me hand histories. That I'm really excited for.
Oh my God, I get to send you hand histories.
Yeah, you
What?
get the homie hand histories.
I get the homie. Oh my God. This is so cool. Although it is like I have to get past the point of like feeling intimidated by you if I were to
I'm
do
not an
that.
intimidating you. We like
No, I know, but I can talk to you about like the craziest shit about my personal life, but
yeah.
like hand histories, I like look up to you immensely and I it's a different dynamic.
I genuinely appreciate that. And thank you for having this has been a wonderful conversation. You've done an amazing job of asking really good questions.
Oh, thanks. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
Definitely. 100%.
Well, I'm gonna stop recording now. Our conversations never really are, but
No, you
I
lead, I follow.
okay.
It'll be like a beautiful dance.
I'm all about beautiful dancing. I was a dance instructor, so you know.
Hell yeah. What did you do any partner dancing?
Yeah, I think we talked about this.
We did.
I
Yeah, we
yeah, I
did.
used to do because I asked you if you did international ballroom because I
Yeah.
used to teach international ballroom.
No. And then we found out that our overlap is me swinging you in circles in some sort of like a Lindy Hop formation.
Yes, we're gonna do that when I come back to Vegas.
That's awesome. It'll be so nice when the dance clubs are actually open and you can go swing. It's been so long for me. I truly
I
miss
haven't
it.
I haven't what is it? Swung dance, swinged dance, swinging,
Swang.
swang danced
I
in
mean,
so long.
saying swing, they don't like it when you call them swingers for unfortunate
For
reasons.
yeah.
But yeah,
Okay, well let me introduce you and then we can see how it goes.
sounds good.